creating cosmos out of chaos.
One of ours owns a place called Mystica Retreat Center. You guys heard of that place?
Oh yeah, in Lake Ardenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were gone because they live in Canada and during the off season, and so they're like, yeah, come, the whole studio is free.
It's a very
and
nice place.
yeah, it's really beautiful, and you get to see the volcano, and we got to actually see it once.
For a minute. It's always like for a minute.
Because of the
Is that
clouds.
where we stayed?
Yes, we stayed once there, and she's married to an Italian.
Yeah,
Yes.
Francesco.
This is where I ate the first gluten-free pizza
That's
after
right.
20 years
Gluten-free,
of
that's right,
being
yeah.
gluten-free.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, Francesco's amazing.
Yeah.
He's so wonderful. The gluten-free pizzas there, not so amazing.
Well, for someone who had to go
But-
gluten-free for a long time, and someone said, "Oh, I can make your pizzas." Like, no, I can't eat. And he said, like, I can make
Oh,
it.
that's so
gluten-free. And it was
cool.
like, you take anything.
They-
Cardboard.
Oh,
Cardboard.
You know where to get the best gluten-free pizza here?
Love Burger.
No.
No, where?
No.
Tell us a better one.
Olivia.
Where?
Opposite. Olivia.
Olivia, they have gluten-free pizza.
I didn't know they had gluten-free.
Outrageous.
Really?
Yeah.
Maris gluten-free pizza.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I had no idea. That's amazing.
That's
That's the tip of the day right there. Oh my
That's right.
goodness.
Okay, that's a podcast.
all the value we needed.
I know what we're eating for dinner tonight.
I know.
Right?
Yes. Oh my
That's
goodness.
incredible. That's such good news.
We've been just
Maris
going.
with extra arugula.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's so
The
good.
go-to.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, you guys, thank you so much for
Yeah,
taking
sure.
the time
Yeah, thank you.
to sit with us today. And it's just always good to connect.
Yeah.
I know our lives are super busy. I think for us, outside of having a deep conversation about that, is also just really great to sit down with you guys because you're such an inspiration to even myself and Mark being a couple of just to see what you guys have done and co-created here with Blue Spirit and this retreat center, and just even the retreat that we were just talking about that's going on right now with the women and the healing that happens in a place like this. That's so incredibly beautiful that you guys have just put your heart and energy and soul into creating a safe space for people to come and find healing.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's so important
And
right
it-
now in the world.
And
you
it's
know?
inspiring to see two people doing it together, like to start something like this, and to for the length of time and the amount of it. We talked about Costa Rica and the effort that goes in here. So the amount of effort it must take. I mean, it's beautiful. We put a lot into what we do in our craft, and when we see others doing similar things, eons ahead, it's like that is the way. It's like it's really beautiful.
Yeah. And you started, Stephan, with Omega, right? Omega Institute. That's what you found in the beginning. How was that transition for you? Like, did you step down from that and come in to do Blue Spirit? Are you still involved in the Omega Institute, or?
Well, I'm not involved in Omega anymore. For a long time, we were involved still. And what happened was I actually wanted to see us create this for Omega. But Omega being a nonprofit, and over the years it had changed some. Organizations get very old. This is what I'm saying. And with old, not the desire to change what it's doing that much. And so it was a really opportunity. Annette and I were then just getting together, and there was the opportunity for us to say, let's just do something else. So at first, this was going to, actually the land was first bought by Omega, and then the board was, we don't know, Costa Rica, and should we do it? And it was just one of those moments of, I'm going. That's what it was going. But for a certain period of time, we did, because I had developed these programs in the Caribbean, because Omega only operated in the summer. So we had Caribbean programs, and I looked all over the Caribbean. We couldn't find the right place for many different reasons, because most places in the Caribbean, which really speaks to Costa Rica, most places in the Caribbean were vacation-oriented places. And the black and white split was very difficult to deal with, because the white people came to vacation and had money, and it was the islands of the black natives there, or who had come there as slaves, but then it was their countries. But there was this real split, and no matter what, I didn't see a way to personally deal with that one. I had worked well with people, but But I came to Costa Rica, and Costa Rica is a country that has tourism isn't their biggest, their major export is medical devices. It's the only country in the Western Hemisphere with no standing army. It's really a nature-based country. So coming here, and Annette didn't know it first because I'd come here a little bit before, but then when Annette came, it was like, I was really deeply grateful for that she went, oh yeah.
I actually even remember I put down some money for my own plot, my own piece of land, and he said, why are you doing this? What if we separated? We just were together for a year. And I said, yeah, especially if we separated, because this is my place,
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I had no idea. So at the beginning of Omega, I'm incredibly intrigued to hear about the change of sort of what the intention was as it began. And, I don't know a lot about it, but I have heard the legend of it sort of was a very foundational piece to the growth of spirituality and like inner connection for North America and the U.S.
Yeah, I think what happened was at a certain time there were a lot of gurus out there and ashrams and yoga teachers. I went to Swami Satchidananda's place in Virginia, and then Chogyam Trungpa's up in Vermont, and we had a Sufi community, but there were very few that really embraced the whole. There were particular sects, and then they would follow through. Now, there was Esalen out on the West Coast, but really, besides Esalen, when Omega started, that was a different one, and it was on the East Coast. And from the very beginning, we had people that it was really quite a wide gathering. So it was a commitment to teachers with depth, and it wasn't just spiritual teachers. I mean, we had the astronaut Edgar Mitchell on our board. We had Ram Dass on our board. Wow. We had the Zen teacher who were very close with Joan Halifax on our board. So there's a wide variety of people who represented the inner life and those people who wanted to go look at the inner life. So whether it was looking at sexuality and relationship, or whether it was looking at the green aspect of the world and what was going on, or the spiritual aspect. So we had all the really good yoga teachers would come, and Swami Satchidananda would come. So it started to be a hub.
Yeah.
Right.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, her work on dying, and because I'm a physician, I did a lot of work with the alternative health movement that would start to come and teach there. So it soon became a place where it was perfectly located 2 hours from New York. So it really grew into that. Thich Nhat Hanh would come and lead retreats for 1,000 people. So
Wow.
it was quite something. And I think it provided something important for its time. But with all things, there become the need for evolutionary steps. And I thought it was missing something, or at least I was missing something. I think Omega still does really good work, but it also became the kind of place, as happens in the spiritual world right now, where people started to, at first, nobody did it for the money. Then after a while, there were people for whom, how many people can I get? And I was on this podcast earlier today where we were talking about, I had the opportunity to see behind the curtain. So I would see people come and teach, and everybody's, oh God, that's so amazing. And then I would talk to them, like, really?
Wow.
This person was just arguing with me about this or that or
wow.
that. So the question really, and I think it's one of the reasons why Annette and I, in our commitment here, want this to be smaller
Right.
and somewhat deeper, so that it doesn't get, it's not about the commercialization of it, it's about depth. It's about having people, and we're very careful in the field that you're in. One of the things that I think Annette and I immediately recognized when we saw the work that the two of you are doing is there's too much yoga body beautiful. It doesn't have the depth. And we immediately felt that what you're after is a really deep practice, and you want to bring it out to people, and I think that that's wonderful, but we really want to find ways where what's going on in this world, we can add greater depth so that there can be a deeper level of healing, a deeper level of understanding, a deeper connection with nature, and mostly a deeper connection with each other and ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's missing in our world. And I think, Annette, you can even speak more to that than me. I'm sure.
But, well, it happens also, Juliana has a beautiful body, but
Well, thank you.
That's so interesting. I think
I think for us, when you speak to that, it's like, I think we mentioned it before, we use like the beauty of our content and like the really cool yoga poses to bring people in
Yes.
as a doorway, right? Because
Yes.
a lot of times I find that people look at spirituality and they're like, oh, well, that's not for me, or they're too intimidated, or they just don't feel like they would belong in that. So there's too much fear to even step in. And so when they can step in on the physical level, like, I just want to do yoga, I just want to stretch, I just want to feel good.
Yeah.
And then you start implanting little seeds in their mind. And then
Yes.
that's where the work happens. And it's for us, even in what we do, we've seen it so often that people write to us and say, oh, I just came here because I wanted a good yoga workout even, and I found meditation. And
Yes.
now I'm diving deeper into this, and now I'm studying in the school, and it's like little doors started to open up.
Yeah.
So I find that it's all of our duties, right?
That's
It's
right.
just
Yes.
to start creating little doors for people to enter. And
Yeah.
that's our role in what we do. But what you guys do here is you create that deeper door for people. You create that next place for them to step into and do
the real work.
the real work, with these retreats and with these teachers and everybody that you bring in, which is so, so important.
Well, and kudos for nailing to recognize Costa Rica is a place where this is so necessary, but it fits so well. Like the energy of nature and the jungle and the people and the culture. Like you're saying, like the only country that doesn't have an army.
Yeah.
Like that's in 2022. That's like, if you say that to most people in Canada or America, they'd be like, no, everyone has an army.
Yeah.
Like no one would ever even consider that could be even an option. So like just culturally, there's something very like amazingly electric about Costa Rica, we find, and it's a constant pull. And it like there is definitely a shadow to it all. Like there's always a struggle, but it's always worth that struggle. And I think struggle is growth, and that's what Costa Rica gives you. It's an accelerator for growth. So to come to a space like this that you guys have built, I mean, it's...
But what really interests me, and I'll just step in, is your journey to even get to this point. You're talking about guiding people into the depth of spirituality, but both of you had to start somewhere along your path. Like, when was it for you when that path began
First
to unfold?
spark.
The first spark for you.
First spark. I think somehow I had the seeker bug from very early on. As a as a little girl, my father was a devout Catholic. So there was a natural matching of my, inquisitive nature, natural devotion to, wow, what is this world about? And nature. We spoke a little bit about how we all grew up, and I grew up also in the countryside. And nature was spirit for me right from the start. It was sort of the wind would speak to me, or when at home it wasn't that easy. I had a pretty complicated childhood, but nature gave me refuge, gave me solace. So it was that I think that was sort of a combination, and it allowed me to tap into the inner essence that is vast and free. And of course I didn't know that this was actually within me. I thought like, oh, this is nature, right? This is where nature also is so potent. It is such an unfettered mirror of our deepest innermost being. So I think things started for me there, and then of course I went through a whole very intellectual phase, and especially I remember in school, in what you in North America or Canada call high school, someone asked me, what is the most important thing for you in the world? And everyone was reading Sartre and, and Camus, and I mean, I read it too. But I said, oh, it's God. And the whole class laughed. And And then sort of like, oh my God, no. I have to, I have to hide that. And then sort of I had this split of trying to be very serious and intellectual and not sort of keeping, to that flame of that deep love that I have. But then, life, pushes you into the direction. I had a serious depression in my 20s. I think it was a lot of the trauma and also this existential quest of who am I and what is this universe about? What is life about? I don't understand. This sort of something just doesn't fit, something doesn't make sense, which today is very clear to me. It's basically, this delusion of separateness that we have. And that is sort of, that keeps being, no matter how perfect, how wonderful your life is, the great weather patterns of life, that we all can have, there's still a nagging unsatisfaction within, which is that seed of separation, this delusion of I'm a solid, separate self, and disconnected, isolated, whether you want to call it love, others, spirit, the whole. Yeah. So that kept, like bugging me and bugging me. And ultimately, I said like, wow, I have to really look at this. And when I was 29 and I had a successful career as a simultaneous translator, I was living a great life in Spain, and I had a pretty wonderful fiancé, but it was like, geez, I'm still suffering. This can't be it. Yeah. So I think this is sort of a usual stage, an archetypal stage in one's spiritual journey. The world is an illusion, right? Yeah. Which doesn't mean, no, this doesn't exist. No, it means what you think the world can give you is an illusion.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that we should not enjoy. Of course, please enjoy. But know that this is temporary at best. And that if we place meaning, contentment, happiness, peace onto something outside of ourselves that can vanish in a second, right? The most beautiful relationship can turn sour. We can be betrayed. Economies crash. All of that. Right. Then, we're building our lives on very shaky ground. So I think this inner journey is very much about finding what remains within, right? What is this unnameable openness that cannot be grasped and yet is animating everything. So that was my journey. And then I went to India and I lived in Japan, and I was like a big seeker, and I started to really find that meditation was most helpful, even though it was grueling. Oh my God. I remember being in this ashram in India and all these beautiful statues, and I'm like, that's not my experience. And and then you somehow, even though it's difficult, follow your bliss, but it doesn't mean it's always blissful. But it was like, that was the food, and I was like, this is, somehow I need to follow that. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's so interesting. I like how you said the archetypal part of the journey, like that moment of like, understanding that the illusion is outside, but there's something constant inside. And when we're told in this culture, and I think everybody, all of us, if you grow up in Western world, sort of whatever that value hierarchy is, it becomes increasingly more difficult, especially year after year with the digital age coming in, to recognize that like all of that is an illusion. Because this, like inside and returning to it, it's the only way to find peace. Like that's the only possible way to go back to the unborn self, like the thing that was there before and will be there forever. And I find that's like, I hear your story and I'm like, I had a very similar 20s, very, very similar. And as you're saying it, I'm like, I've never felt it put into words in that way. So,
It's like that quest, right, for self-realization.
But as we talk about the archetypal thing, there's this beautiful three-liner from the Katha Upanishad that say, the world is an illusion, only Brahman is real, Brahman is the world. And we can say, for those, who maybe don't know what Brahman means, but it means, the ultimate reality or fundamental reality, maybe it's better put. We can also say the world is an illusion, only the true self is real, right? Or only spirit is real. And then the third one, which is really important, and this is really important for Stephan, it's not about like, oh, I'm just hanging out in the eternal, in the spirit, right?
Yeah.
No. Then we return to the world. The third line is, and the world is spirit. And I think this is really important because even finding out who we really are and really uncovering our true essence and learning to cultivate this in daily life, that's great. But it is to be served. Yeah. We have to bring the gold down to the mountain because it's not mine. It is, right? And I think this is really beautiful. In Buddhism, you know, there's like, you say like, there's no individual enlightenment until everyone has seen the true reality. We are not done. So I think this is really important in practice, you know. Of course, we have moments where we do retreat, right? Because it needs this focus. It needs this, okay, I need a moment of not being distracted by this and that. I have to really, you know, familiarize myself with the open ground of being. And then I bring it back. How do I live this in daily life instead of making, again, another separation, right? Oh, I'm spiritual, but you are not. Wow, that's a big rat trap.
That's, the division going on. It's really interesting. Or even as you were saying, like before Omega, how even people walking a spiritual path would be like, oh, well, that, you know, it's almost how religion segregates off too. It's like, but in a practice where union is to us at least is the ultimate goal, to see each as each other. Like you are me and I am you. And that's the hardest thing in this reality, I think, for most to grasp. But, you know, you'd hope that the ones walking the path of, you know, spiritual intention would be the first to reject the idea that it's been sort of conditioned in us from the minute we were born.
And for you, Annette, like when you started along your path of healing, you know, you said you had depression and everything. Was there specific methods? Like meditation, you said once, but that really helped you have that breakthrough? Because I know, like, right now you're an incredible, like, somatic therapy, and you do all of these really beautiful, you know, offerings for the world. Was that something that you felt in your personal life that helped you heal and guided you to this?
Yes, and I don't think there's one breakthrough. We have many breakthroughs and many breakdowns.
Yeah, true.
And also I want to say something here, which I heard recently from a dear friend of mine. She gave her first public Dharma talk as a Zen priest, and I so loved how she finished. And then she said, and we keep failing, right? We keep failing and failing and failing. So I think this is also important to speak about, that we have these aspirations of leaning into, you know, wholeness and living from wholeness, and we fail, you know, we fail. So it's just human.
Yes.
Okay. So just to make this very clear, you know. So for me, I think what from my own direct experience, and then also from seeing it in my clients or seeing it maybe in broader mainstream society, I don't think just one type of spiritual practice is enough. Because if we just look for a moment, and of course, you know, there's, you know, Christian contemplative, so, you know, that's incredible deep, and there's Sufism, but let's just look at the Eastern side, right, which is the Hindu, the yoga. We both are practicing Tibetan Buddhist. So these are societies and cultures that are imbued with the sacredness in daily life. You know, in India, so many houses, before you step into the house, you know, there's this, the type like the swastika paint on the floor, you know, there's ornaments, there are temples there. But it's not just, you know, on Sunday we all go to church or we do this. It's deeply imbued, right, in the cultural fabric. And I think most of us, right, we grow up in very secular cultures. So the sacred in itself is sort of like this thing. It's somehow separate from daily life, and yet we
even when we think of the indigenous people,
right,
the degree to which the sacred in the land is part of their life. It's not something oh, it's green out there.
Right.
Or we should do something for the environment out
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
But they are that.
Yes.
The separation between I and the we of nature
Yeah.
is really just together, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Integration, full
Full integration.
surrender, integration.
So sorry, I'm making a long loop.
No.
So,
No,
but
it's
coming
great.
back, so then when we in the Western culture, having been raised and grown in this first very full of distraction, speedy societies, achievement-driven societies, left-brain dominated cultures, we deal with an extra portion of obstacles that people in Tibet, Bhutan, India don't deal with.
Right.
I remember, what I just said, like, well, the most important thing is God, and the whole class sort of laughed. And afterwards, I was called the pretty but the stupid one.
Oh my goodness.
But in India, everyone would say, like, yes, of course,
The brilliant
right?
one. Right? Exactly. That's
So anyway, so we deal with an extra thickness of delusion of separateness that needs to be addressed. And I think for many Westerners, I'm just lumping us all together, modern Westerners, how that is felt and experienced in daily life is a deep belief in our fundamental unworthiness. The I'm not good enough, right? Which on one hand, every human being that has been born in the last 200,000, I think 300,000 years, has that meaning-making brain that misinterprets failure of the environment as something meaning fundamentally about who you are, whether it's I'm fundamentally unsafe, I'm fundamentally too much, I'm fundamentally not good enough, I don't matter, I'm not welcomed. All of us have this because we have this brain, but it gets exacerbated. Is that the right?
Exacerbated,
Or strengthened by our cultures that really drill the separation even deeper into us.
right.
So we need more than just meditation or just yoga. And we agree yoga is not just asana, right? It's deep studies, the 8 limbs.
Yes.
But I found in my life that I needed some type of Western therapeutic approach, like somatic trauma work. Incredibly important to unwind, from the nervous system, from the brain, these neurological pathways of unworthiness, and then nature, really nature.
Yeah.
So
Can you explain a little bit more about what somatic trauma therapy is, just for people out there that may not
Sure.
know what that is?
For a long time, I think mainstream society and even psychology thought that talking therapy was the way of addressing things, right? And this is not to say that psychoanalysis cannot be incredibly profound and helpful. But when there was first recognition of trauma, and I think it happened after the First World War in Europe, where people came back from the battlefield, young people, and they were called shell shocked. That was the first label that was given to trauma, right? And then over time, it became clear that talking about things, and first of all, often you cannot talk about it, right? Because trauma has an impact on every part of your brain. And there's like a disconnect between brain functions and different types of memories. So often you cannot even speak coherently about what happened. But even if you do, you go over the experience again and you get re-traumatized. You have to relive it over and over again, which is so difficult. So how do we need to deal with this? So there was a great breakthrough, I think, and I hope I don't do any disservice to any other person out there, any other type of therapy that was before that. But from my studies and my understanding, who was really instrumental to bring it to a larger prominence was Peter Levine, who's the founder of the somatic experiencing method. It's often called SE. And he, by studying nature and what wild animal in nature do when something terrible has happened, realized that we as human beings were not able to shake a very difficult experience just off, like the gazelle does after the cheetah really didn't get her.
Right.
So he started then to look at trauma not from the psychological lens, and also not from, oh my God, this is so terrible what has happened to you, but to say, hang on a minute, it's actually not the event, but it is what our brain and body were not able to process in the moment what happened. So then he started to look at, okay, how can we help the body? How can we help the brain to safely unwind what is stuck there?
Right.
So, and this is where, a somatic, soma is Greek for body, right? A somatic approach to work through trauma is really important.
And what's the process actually? Like,
well, there are different, somatic approaches. There's also Hakomi is an approach. There's also Pet Ogden's, I think it's called psychosensory motoric response. So, but let's just say the process is that you create a sense of safety for the traumatized brain and body, whether it's first through healing imagery or being, the therapeutic and empathic presence of another nervous system being sort of a safe anchor. And then once there is sort of like, let's say, a platform, whether it's the safe landing figure of the therapist or a platform where, this is how safety feels, then you sort of walk slowly into the, let's say, the traumatized knots and just sort of dip a little bit your little toe in there. And then you feel an activation, right? And then you immediately titrate back to the safe ground.
right.
So, and then you go back and forth, and this is not just in one session, but maybe over many sessions, so that slowly the brain and the body recognize, oh, okay, this is how it is to feel safe. Oh, okay, and then this is how we can slowly unwind and let go. I mean, this is very simplified how I speak it, but that's the process.
That's really beautiful.
And it's something, it sounds very practical.
Yes.
To be able to, like you said, like an alternative that could bring great benefit to so many people.
Oh, so many people.
And it's astounding because outside of yourself, like there's not a lot of people talking about this, like about that being such a valuable process for people to go through to heal.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in this day and age, trauma and everything else aside, healing is like, it's so key. We're in very difficult times in so many ways. So,
and as people get triggered in these times, you can see that everybody is sort of emotionally charged.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't just have a simple conversation because so many people are so traumatized these days that they're ready to burst.
right.
And so one little thing, so you get these fights on airplanes, or you get, because people have people have always had different points of view, but now the points of view go,
Right.
Yeah.
so that's really where doing that kind of work, simply slowing down, starts to help, so that we can, everybody's going so fast, we have to slow down some. That's where being in nature is very helpful. And one of the things we're trying to do here at Blue Spirit is bring people into that kind of atmosphere where things are slowed down. And then during our winter time, we have all of these experts who come who really deal with this specific stuff, like we have this year. I mean, Gabor Mate, who's known for his work with trauma, and Bessel van der Kolk.
And so Jack Soul, who does
Jack
collective
Saul,
trauma
who does
healing.
collective trauma and what happens to that. And then we have Dick Schwartz coming and people like that. So it's not just, as Annette is saying, it's not just sitting and doing meditation. That's important
Yeah.
because it helps slow one down. But it's recognizing, and one of the things I think we find with the Tibetan practice we do, it's not just a practice of the mind. One has to really feel it deep into the body. And again, that to me is what nature does. That's one of the key elements, that one has to really see it from a very holistic perspective.
Right. Well, you mentioned slowing down, and I think you wrote a book about
Time shifting.
About time shifting,
Yeah.
right? How much value, especially, I'd imagine. I mean, I think you wrote that book maybe
25 years.
20 years. Now think about
I often think about if I were to write it now.
well, that's what
A part 2 is to come,
a part
right?
two might be necessary,
Yeah.
but like the time shifting concept, I think is incredibly interesting, especially because of the level of the frequency that everything's not just emotionally moving at, but actually physically now too, and the amount of like just the amount that our minds go through in a day in comparison to even 20 years ago,
Yes.
because everything just comes so quickly. And I saw a guy talking about it on YouTube or something, and he was one of these people that's very pro-tech, and he's like, now think of the minutes we save and he starts doing all the little apps things and all the minutes, 10 minutes here and 20 for not having to go to the store here and another 30 for here. But the process of being that productive, there's some magic in it, definitely. But also, outside of that, then you have all the other apps that aren't making your life better, doing the same amount of heavy lifting on you and on your mental state.
Well, I would say what I've been actually really looking at with that recently is we were sold the belief that having all of these digital machines was going to save us a lot of time. And I don't know anybody who's working less time. So everybody gets onto the train of, in order to do it, I have to go faster. And then and the problem, which in some way what Annette is talking about related to the underlying trauma, is that since these underlying emotions haven't really been dealt with, of which we all have to a major degree of trauma or to a lesser, but everybody's holding something there. So when actually things slow down, we start to go like this. And when that starts to happen, we reach for the digital machine. And so you have people say, I have time off. What do they do? Their time off goes into the little machines that are doing that, or the TV, or the da-da-da. So there's very little just sitting in nature.
Right.
And just being quiet. And that to me is really, until we can start to sit quietly with ourselves, we have a lot of trouble. And so it is speeding up. And it's not saved us any time. I mean, those little machines do, but we give it to something unworthy. We should be having so much time off now, but people are afraid of time off.
Right.
What are they going to do with it? They'll be bored. So when you think of the indigenous people, of which we get visited here by some of the indigenous people from Colombia who do medicine retreats, and they live, I was talking with my son about this the other day, who does work with them, and one of the shamans who comes and just stays in the house with him, Eli was just saying to me, it's so interesting because Lucho, he's always in a good mood, and he always seems relaxed, and he's really happy. Nothing seems to bother him. He's just good. And, it's like nothing comes up and, oh my God. And we have these kinds of reactions when something happens to us. Oh God. And it takes a lot of practice. And it really comes, I believe, from practice to just start to. And in order for that to happen, our sympathetic nervous system has to be in such a way where it's not just getting triggered and then off we go.
Right.
And one little thing, and that little thing, we think we're reacting to it, not because it's a little thing, but we think it's going to become this. So we think that the house is burning, when in reality, some little thing just happened, but we react. So we're really on trigger. And I think that has a lot to do with this speed thing and sort of the collective trauma that we feel and the worry of what might happen. And how do we let go of that? That's really the practice.
Right. And
it's a deeper practice than just sitting and meditating.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you guys also feel like, I don't know, to me lately it feels like time is moving faster? Like, I don't know if we are busy and we have less time to just be. But at times I tell that to Mark, I'm like, I just feel like, the days are just like, it's like someone actually sped up the time and the time is being worked through faster. Yeah. Do you have a similar experience or is it just me?
we need to mention that you have a how old is a year and a half?
Put it into reference.
I think every parent can probably, of a young child can, because, your brain, right, is like, needs to take care of him. So there's more, right? So I think the more there is stimulation of some sort, that also can create more the inner speediness.
Okay.
The experience of a subjective experience of inner speediness. And that then creates a sense of, everything is going faster. So there's like our favorite Tibetan teacher, Dzogchen Rinpoche, he says there are 3 speeds. There's the physical speed, right? Like running to the bus stop. There's the speed of, your mental discursive thinking mind, like racing thoughts, or sometimes, they're a little trickle. But then the inner speed that we spoke about, the nervous system or subtle body, we would say, right? The subtle body in yoga or in Vajrayana, Tantric Buddhism. The subtle body, there's the speediness. And that's also the speediness that is so uncomfortable that we feel, I have time off. And then we feel that speediness. And it's so uncomfortable and so unnerving because it's basically, the winds, or I should say the prana in Hinduism, is banging against the channels. And it feels really uncomfortable. So then we want to get away. We want to jump out of our skin. And then we either overeat or we surf on the internet to zone ourselves out.
Right.
But back to your point, I know many people say this, but it's not my experience that life is happening faster. No.
It's probably the baby.
It's probably the baby, I think. Yeah. Of needing to be like...
Yeah, because it's true. When you say it, I'm always
energetically, being plugged in there. And
No, it makes total sense. And also watching him to grow because he's changing so fast every day. And you're just like, what? You're already doing that? You know what I mean? It just allows time to feel like it's really, really speeding because he's going through shifts and changes every day, you know? So that's interesting. I never connected the two with the baby. That makes sense though.
But it's also good to see, I had an experience this past year, which was that I'd mentioned before in our programs here that I had Omega doing them for a while. So we had shifted because as COVID started, they didn't want to do it, which was a wonderful opportunity for us to create our own special programs during the winter time. So this past winter was with COVID happening, and in the way we set it up, there was a pressure on me that involved, I don't know to go into details, but it just quadrupled the amount of work that I had to do. And it meant that early in the morning I was on the computer, late at night I was on the computer sorting it all out because we had so many people canceling and then refunds. And And I had realized that the pressure I felt on me was similar to when we first started. And I was really committed, and have been committed since then, to really shift that. So part of it is coming into recognition of what's going on, because it doesn't change. So if you're saying, oh, maybe it's the baby. So if one recognizes that, it doesn't mean that you're not going to deal with the baby anymore, but maybe you're going to deal a little differently. So since that time, and when you first started saying how, I realized all of a sudden I feel I have much more relaxed time, quiet time in my life, But I don't think I would have if I hadn't seen the effect of what was going on.
Right.
So it made me, okay. And so many people I see, because I've consulted with a lot of people when I had written my time book, who they're doing a business and they realize, I want to get out of it. And the moment they stop, maybe they sell a business, things slow down at first, and then they go, what am I going to do next? And before you know it, you're into the next thing.
Right.
So there's so much going on in the world. We can keep jumping into the next thing quickly. So it's really important to sort of step back. And I've watched myself. I have a lot of good friends with some really great ideas who have sort of come to me to be involved. And I'm really at the point of saying, I'd love to help as an advisor. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And just going, okay, enough. Enough is okay, because in this world, as one gets more successful, there's next levels of success to get to.
Right.
And they're so enticing.
Yeah.
And they come like, wow, and wouldn't you like this too? And now we can do so it's very difficult in a world where everybody's sort of thinking that the more is the better.
Yeah, the out there, the grasping. Yeah.
It's like climbing the infinite ladder. There's always a next step.
Yeah.
It's funny we talk about that because YouTube has been a very deep teacher for us, and the process of self-awareness and the exercise it takes to not allow your ego to take over the process of what you're here to do, which is a service.
Right.
But when you play in the pool of YouTube, and all of a sudden there's always someone with a bigger channel, or there's always someone getting more views, like it's a never-ending ladder of comparison. And I think I've seen a lot of really talented creators and people with a lot to offer get really caught up, and then it affects their work because their work no longer comes from an attention. Their work is now being guided by whatever that next thing is that they see someone else doing, and they spend so much energy trying to get to that thing that they forgot why they were there in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's something, we practice, I don't know, relentlessly. Like it's coming back to source and being like, okay.
That's a deep practice.
Yeah.
And you fail. And that's the thing that I like about that you said it, and you both said it actually, like the failure is part of it, but it's the idea of being aware of that moment of failure so that you can be like, oh, so that's how that feels.
Yes, exactly.
Well, now I can learn from that.
Exactly.
And and the pain of that.
We learn more from our failures than our success.
10,000 times over. I don't know if success teaches anything, to be honest. Like, there's nothing worse than some successful people out there. What have you learned? Like, honest to God. So, it's fascinating. And the time thing, I think that's really interesting because we can learn a lot about that. I think like slowing down, because we're very
especially right now.
We very like
starting this new project,
this
right?
new project. And it's funny because you can serve and you can have purpose, but at some point you also have to serve yourself. And I think a lot of people forget that. And I think that's one of the most important things about service is if you want to be compassionate to the world, you start with compassion with yourself, and then maintain that. Because for us, we've seen what happens to us when we forget about us. And again, like the failure of that has taught us, wow, we are very, very strict about our mornings. Like we are very, very strict about our family times, and we are very, very mindful being like what I found was interesting. What you said is the guardian of our minutes, like the people that come in and they're like, oh, we have this thing, let's do this. And then you're like, I'm going to use that. I'd love to as an advisor. Like, that's fantastic because it's so easy to be like, oh, that'll be exciting, and we'll do this. And it turns into, because there's always something.
Of course, your ego always wants more, right? It clings onto more and more and more. So when you guys started Blue Spirit, like, did you have that as well? Like, you had a vision, and it's manifested into this beautiful thing, but have you had to find that realization to be like, well, we should build this or we should build that? Like, have you had those kinds of moments as well? Or are you just fully like, no, this is exactly everything that we dreamed of. We don't want to add to it, expand it. I'm just curious on how your ego's been controlled with.
I don't want us to get staid or old in terms of what we're doing. So it's really important that it remains fresh and feels aligned with, so I expect the programs we're going to do, I see us doing a lot of changes in the types of programs we had. It was funny, I had a phone call earlier today of somebody wanting to do a lot of programs here, and he kept telling me about how much publicity he was going to get for us. And I said to him, we're not really looking for publicity. It's just not how we sell this place. We're looking for relationship. It's really on that level. So I don't want to be all over the internet, because actually the wrong people will come. Yeah. And I'm not making anybody wrong. It's just, it won't be the right fit. We want the people who are drawn here because they can tell what we're authentically doing. And rather than, oh, that's the next new best place to go. So what we're interested in is making sure that the people who are coming here to teach, as much as we can, are doing it in an aligned way with what's really not just, okay, we're going to have a great vacation. And I'm all for people having wonderful vacations. But there are a lot of places you can go have a great vacation.
That's well said.
We are interested in people coming and doing next step inner work here. And if we can provide a place like we're doing this week, where we have women doing incredible work, and that to me is an honor for us to be able to provide that. So but we want to keep seeing how we can extend that and make that more available. And though I have people who have asked me about, do you want to do another one? Again,
oh my God, so many times.
Really?
Like,
Yeah.
I have this amazing place in Brazil. I have this amazing place in Bali. Stephan, can you come and do another Blue Spirit? We give you all the money. And we're like, no.
You'll be an advisor.
You'll be an advisor.
That's so interesting.
No, and because we'd love to see other, and I'm even happy as an advisor to tell people what to do. It's not about even making money or having to get a consulting. It's because I'd love to see more places like this happening, where people really do the deep work. But I don't feel we have to brand it.
Right.
We just think it's good work, and that's all. And so we're at this point in life at ease in our comfort. So
that's wonderful, though. That's like,
Place to be.
that's a dream for many people, I think, is to find that place.
Yeah.
And like, kudos, because what you've built, it means something, and it has a deep purpose.
Thank you.
And through that, you're able to find like the equanimity to relax, but also to continue to serve. And I think that's, for us, that's the ultimate goal, is to get to that place. And to so many people, you hear about it from so many people, they say, one day we're going to open a retreat center. Like, it's the most cliche thing for a yogi to say, but it's like, it's somehow made its way to be like the pinnacle point of like, of people in the spiritual services place. And it's amazing when you see it realized, because I think that's the inspiration that people are being drawn to understand like how much it matters. And in 2022, it matters more than ever, I think, at least. Like, I think not just to the world, but also in the spiritual community. I think you guys are incredibly inclusive here, and being inclusive to all types of like, whenever I come on your website, I'm always looking at the different teachers and the variety of healing and all the different programming. And it's really beautiful. And to see, like, right here in our backyard, like, this is happening. We always, people are like, what's going on in Nosara? You're probably one of the 3 things we always mention, like, because it's just like, it's special. It's really special.
Yeah. And especially just like Mark was saying, where we are in the world right now, like, there is a sense of heaviness and darkness. You see it everywhere, right? And I find that there's, whether it was through the pandemic or now also with the war going on in Ukraine and Russia, it's like people are really forced to either connect deeper with their hearts or to find some sort of healing from somewhere else, because it's like, how do you cope with all of the madness that is surrounding us? And, you know, of course, coming to retreats that you guys provide is one way. But also, like you were saying, like, there's not one method to healing. Like, there's probably other, like, if, let's say if somebody didn't have enough money or resources to be able to come to a beautiful place like Costa Rica and, you know, be here for 2 weeks. And, you know, how can they find healing?
What are the first steps, in your guys' opinion?
Like, just to help them cope through the difficulty of the world right now.
I have something to say. I'm glad you asked this question. Thank you, because even when I talked about trauma work, you know, not everyone has the resources even to work individually. So have been incredibly advances and spread of information about, you know, the polyvagal system. Does this say something to you?
No.
Okay, let's just say old style autonomic nervous system. So autonomic states. So when I spoke about the speediness, so they're sort of like, and this is something I think is really important for all of us, you know, and I think it's one key. You don't need to believe in God. You don't need to, you know, become a pretzel or anything, but we all have this autonomic nervous system, and there are 3 states it can be in. And if we use sort of that metaphor or image of traffic lights, when the nervous system is in a green state, it feels safe, there's a sense of connection, we feel open to connect with others, or also, oh no, how wonderful, I'm in a great flow, I potter around by myself. It's, you know, where the brain sort of, you know, there's oxytocin, the digestive fluids are flowing. So that's an optimal state for our nervous system to be in. No one will be in this green zone 24/7, you know, that's not real, right? Because there is danger. So the next thing, when there's a sense of threat, whether it's an overestimated threat of, oh my God, my computer crashed, oh my God, it's life and death, right? Or real threat, oh my God, I hear like funny noises, you know, behind as I walk through this little dark alley, you know, we go into yellow state, which is mobilization, you know, fight or flight, right? And just to notice, is my nervous system, is my body right now in the green zone? Do I feel dropped in? Do I feel, no, there's like this going on. Okay. And then how can we tweak that to come back to green? Okay, and I give you little things. I love to be practical. But the next step, you know, so yellow is one thing, right? Fight or flight. And if that doesn't work in real life, you know, when the antelope cannot run away from the cheetah, she gets caught. I don't know if you saw nature movies when you were kids. I did, you know. And I'm like, oh, mama.
Could never watch that part.
Exactly.
Never.
But basically what you see at a certain point is the antelope just, the muscles go, you know, stiff, or they go limp, because they go into the red zone, which is the feigned death. It's immobilization, it's shock. It's also dissociation, and it's nature's compassionate response to not feel fear and not feel pain anymore. So basically, the antelope, good news, doesn't feel pain as she gets shredded into pieces. And it's the same for us too. And I've been in a car accident, for instance, when I was 17, and the car, you know, went around and around and around. I didn't feel a thing. It was like a psychedelic movie. Oh, wow, everything slowed down, you know. And then once the car stopped, all of a sudden I realized, okay, there's music playing, and then eventually the pain came, the cuts, you know, the concussion and all of that. So back to the red state. When our nervous system goes into red state is when we go into shutdown. We go into numbing out. It's the state where I feel hopeless. I don't have motivation. If this goes long time on, it's depression, right? So becoming more sensitized to, is my system in green? Is it in yellow? Is it in red? And then having little neural exercises of how to bring it back more to green every day. You know, little things. Also, if you with your baby, you know, how can you slow down? Okay, a moment. Okay, I notice the speediness. As yogis, you know, a longer exhale. Right. Brings the system down. Other little things, you know, if you're not into breathing, you know, I call it the little butterfly stroke. So you put your hands like this. I don't know if that's on camera. and you can just sort of like tap. And automatically your body will fetch a deeper breath. And you just stay, you know, like sort of as if you're comforting yourself. And just, you know, stay with that. Just stay. So this is one thing. Another really powerful thing is to name your emotions, to name what's going on. Because when we name something, we bring more the neocortex online. So instead of being fight, flight, or freeze response, you bring on that part of your brain that is observing. So for instance, let's say you're running around with your little child and you feel like, oh my God, I'm projecting. And you take a moment, okay, hang on, time out, you know, okay, what's going on? And then you name, frustration, out of breath, exhaustion. Just by naming, there's an unblending from the feeling. You know, we're already diffusing a little bit that charge that just took over.
Right.
So we call it name to reframe, right? And then if you do this together with something touching the body, or if you want to hold yourself like this, as you name to reframe, this starts to create new neurological pathways. And the more you do it, and I don't say, you know, you have to do it 20 times, but just getting sort of used to it so it becomes second nature, right? Like a good habit. Well, I'm not feeling well. What's going on? Okay. Ooh, there's a knot in my stomach. Okay, interesting. I'm upset about what Stephan said last night. Interesting. Okay.
I didn't mean it.
You know, so even having that emotional granularity of becoming more and more aware of like, what's going on? What is my feeling? Not to fix it or not to change or suppress it, but creating that positive holding environment and then helping and supporting the organism and coming into a more connected, collected state, the green, where we then can look at what's going on from, you know, resilience or more groundedness and a bigger spaciousness.
And do you find that when we don't take the time, like as I find when you're saying this, it's almost like we're coming into awareness and processing. Let's say if you're feeling angry, you're like, wait, I'm angry. So I'm actually trying to understand these emotions. What happens, like when people don't do that kind of practice and they don't allow time to process, all those emotions are energy, right? And energy gets stored in the body.
Yeah.
Do you also find that like this is, remember we were talking earlier how there's like this intensity right now that people are just ready to go in the minute if something sparks. Like I wonder it's because of all of these things that are happening right now and people aren't processing it. And so this energy is stored in our bodies.
Yes.
And then it's also, I mean, you could speak to this being a medical doctor, like that's how illnesses also start to come forward, right? Because it's energy that isn't being released.
Yeah.
Do you guys
that's
see
exactly
that?
right.
Totally. Yeah. There's also something more, maybe before you say. The interesting thing is, you know, because you said, or Stephan said, you know, everyone is ready to jump. We have, you know, our this organism is constantly checking if life is safe or not, 24/7 through something called neuroception. So when you enter a new room, if you you meet someone that you've never met before, your brain precedes thinking, precedes conscious, you know, radar, is checking out, is this safe or not? So as collectively we're getting more riled up, right? Whether it was the pandemic, whether it's the war, whether it's the bombardment of negative news, right? We are feeding this collective pool of it's unsafe, and unsafe. And when we are unsafe, when the body feels unsafe, green state, it goes into yellow, mobilizing, fight, I hate you, right? This is what's going on. And when if it's too much, burnout, we go into red. And, you know, we lose hope. We feel like, oh my God, the world is such a shitty, dire place. Like you don't even know anymore how you if you want to participate, right? So, so we need to process, not just for our own well-being, but for the well-being of everyone around.
Yeah, the collective body.
The collective body. But when that energy, it's almost like too late, you haven't processed it and now you're sick, right? Like, so you have a disease and illness that enters your body. Are we able to find healing through energy work versus, like, in the Western world, as soon as you come to a doctor, oh, I'm sick, I'm not feeling okay, this pill, this pill, this pill, and they just like pound you with, pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
But I believe that there's, of course, that's necessary sometimes depending on the condition, but like there is a way for us to find healing through energy work and that holistic approach. Yeah. You guys have seen that a lot here or in your past experience?
As you were saying, you can also look at indigenous people, some of the tribes in the Amazon or in South America, where the belief is that if one person's sick, it's the whole community that is. So there's the feeling, and I think then it's also that way with the body. If there's one area that's a problem, it's telling you that there's something off in the larger energy field. So it's not that sometimes you may need surgery, sometimes you may need a medication. The problem that I always saw in the medical field is that it's totally become reliant on medications. And that's because of the involvement of the pharmaceutical industry, which basically has informed doctors what they should and shouldn't do, which is to sell their products. And it's caught. And so it's no longer something that, and we know, and this is the work when Gabor Mate comes here, and he has been so much talking about the degree to which all of this trauma occurs and it affects the body. Jeff Rediger, who was here talking about how this affects the body, and yet we're still looking for medication instead of looking at what are the childhood experiences that, in the way Annette talks about, how does one start to unravel that so that there's a greater at-easeness. So along the line, things get tighter and tighter and tighter until finally you need surgery. Or finally you need a medication. But I would see people, a simple way to say it is I would see people with hypertension. So let's just say the blood pressure goes up. And most doctors just immediately talk about medication instead of saying, is there any stress in your life?
Something bad happening.
Anything going on in your relationship? Anything going on at work? Or, your kids here. So it's like, just let's start with the basics of recognizing that it's this body is living with other bodies, if you're in a family or in a community. And so we have to look at what's going on in the larger sphere. So it's not necessarily, now sometimes you can have a problem that you really do need the medication.
Of course.
But so it's that wider view, which also comes, it's let's say in the work that the four of us do, and is a lot about prevention. Prevention is if one does the things that support health, one doesn't as easily get sick. That's the case. If you're going to, because you are so stressed out every night, start to drink, sooner or later that becomes a problem. Or if you're using overusing medications. But the children in Western societies are severely suffering. The amount who are on medication already at young age because they're so traumatized already is an epidemic that people just don't even want to look at right now.
Yeah, it's not talked about enough. That's the future. That is.
Yeah, what are those children going to be in 10, 15 years if they're already dependent on medication right now?
That's right.
Like, how do we break that cycle for them?
I think, you mentioned indigenous traditions, and I'm still studying with the Quero, which is a nation of nature priests, you could say, high in the Peruvian Andes. And they have a very beautiful way of, how can we work energetically, with what you mentioned, like, okay, I feel so, how can we heal? And let me actually say something first, because I think someone who may be listening right now and is dealing with, a severe illness of some sort, or even psychologically, our brain has the tendency to look at primordially at what's bad, what's wrong with us, which then wires in even more worries, right? We have this, by evolution, negative biased brain. So one way of providing healing, of providing space, of bringing attention to what is actually working and what is good, because as long as you're breathing, there's more right than wrong with you. John Kabat-Zinn, right?
That's very beautifully said.
Yes, so beautifully said. Is to bring attention to, in this Peruvian tradition, they say to the Sami. And Sami is the refined energy that's all around you. So in nature, and so often we go through a park, a forest, we're on the beach, and we say, oh, this is wonderful. But take a moment really into, open your body, feel, smell, and become very curious about what feels good about this. And then imagine you're opening, your little energy bubble, or just really bringing attention and enriching and savoring the experience of how good the earth smells right now. Take an extra minute for that. The rain, wow, it felt on my lips, oh, it's fresh. Oh, the sun. Oh, maybe I can imagine the sun is melting, the worries in my heart for a moment.
Yeah.
So this is freely given. This is, you don't have to go to the great healer,
Yeah.
This is so simple. And then on the other side, you can see whatever is maybe challenging in your life is the dense energy. There's no good or bad. I really love this about the tradition. There's no good or bad. It's just, energy is either just dense,
Right.
confused, or it's refined. And then you can imagine that the dense energy, you just give it, to the mother, you give it to a river, you give it to water, and that's a sacred exchange, Aini in Quechua, that we human beings are the only ones who produce dense energy. It's called hucha in Quechua. But the beauty is, it's not like, oh, bad humans. No, we feed the earth with that.
Yeah.
So it's the same as, as we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out, I never can say this word, carbon
dioxide.
Thank you. And, so that's what the trees then take again.
Right.
So it's this beautiful cycle. So let's not think about, oh my God, what's going on and I need to find the amazing healer. Start to find these simple things of where you really savor what's good in your life, or bring attention to this friend that you have that sees you, that accepts you, that you feel okay, you feel safe with, and just nourish and savor and stay with this feeling and let that spread throughout your body and brain. So that's medicine, freely given.
Wow, nature.
And so you study this in the Peruvian Andes. Whereabouts is that?
Right now it's over Zoom.
Okay.
Right, because
I guess that's a good point. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I started, I think it was 10 years ago.
Wow.
First that I got in contact with that particular tradition. And then there was a 3-year program that was sort of set up by a Western person. And it did a little smorgasbord of different Andean tradition and different more shamanic practices. But now I'm really only studying with them, and they don't call themselves shaman, because the word shaman really means that you go into an altered state. Altered state through drumming, rattling, or taking medicine plants. That's shamanism. They call themselves pacos, or nusta pacos, the women, and that means nature priest. So you don't go into an altered state. It's like, well, it's right here. Why do I need to alter my state, right? But you start to sensitize yourself to what the Sami, the refined energy that's all around, right? Wow. And then and also how to serve nature. So, I do a lot of offerings to different nature beings. And so.
What does that look like, an offering to a nature being?
Okay, so there's the traditional way and the untraditional way. Maybe first the untraditional way, so that maybe anyone can do this at home.
Totally.
So, for instance, become aware of, is there and nature being where you live, that particular chestnut tree in the park, or that river that you often sit on the bench and you just look into. So don't see it as, oh, that's the river, it's a tree. It's a being. And they actually speak to you also. So start to nourish a deeper relationship with one nature being that really, you have this natural affinity with.
Yeah.
And appreciate the medicine, right? That, oh my God, whenever I look into the river, wow, there's a calming, or that tree gives me this, wow, this rootedness. So become aware of that, and then make a little offering just with organic things. Maybe you take a little leaf and you put like some coffee beans, a banana cut off, or a little flower, and then you bring it there. You put it into the river, you put it at the root of the tree, just to, start this this reciprocity of like, I honor you, I see you, you're a being, and I can so much learn from you, and I want to be in connection with you, And then traditionally, they're a little more elaborated. I will not get into it.
Okay. I mean, for things that people can do at home, that's
so beautiful.
Brilliant. That's so beautiful.
Well, it's so important to start really thinking about that connection to nature. And I really feel like as humanity, we've lost that connection.
Oh, yeah.
You see how much damage we are doing as a collective species to Mother Earth.
Yes.
So it's like, even just that practice like that, for people to actually see trees and rivers and ocean as a living being.
Yeah.
It'll help them, I find. It'll help me for sure. I'm already very connected to it, but even just that sense of offering to be like, wow, we are the same in a completely different way, but we are the same. We're the same energy, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in New York City.
Oh, wow.
And so it was
very far.
I would go to the park, and it was fun, but the degree of cut off from nature when I talked to friends who grew up in nature, and behind their home would be a river or a spring, and they really had climbing trees. I climbed some trees, but it wasn't the same as what I hear other people talk about. And I think so many people have grown up in urban environments that it further takes them away from feeling there's this being of nature.
Wow.
And I think that's where when you have these peoples who have lived so deep in nature and so intertwined, where nature talks to them, they talk to nature, and what they see is so. We tend to think that we see so much more, but I know if one goes with somebody who lives in, let's say, in some of these rainforests, what they see is completely different than what we see.
Right.
And so I think that I really admire what Annette is doing with this now, because it so deepens a whole other level of our sensory connection to the world that's possible.
Yeah.
And so easy to write it off in our higher thinking mind. It's just a tree.
Oh, for sure.
It's not thinking anything. It's not being anything, but...
Oh my gosh, those trees. I remember we were in the Amazon once in Peru, and we went on we had a guide with us, and we went through the jungle with machetes, and I remember even he's like, oh, here's a tree, and if you cut a branch off, there will be water that you can actually drink. And it's like clean water.
And we drank it, and it was wonderful. And it was
2 feet over. Here's a tree. If you cut a branch, there will be blinding poison that comes out will blind you for the rest of your life. Like, wow, okay. And these are just trees.
Don't mix them up either.
Yeah, imagine how do you, and they look very similar. It's like, if you're thirsty, don't do that, But that's so interesting, how powerful nature is. And, to be honest, it makes me so sad when we're talking about trees, because we were, we have a home on Vancouver Island in Canada. And one of the most beautiful things about Vancouver Island is that we have these old growth forests. These trees are thousands of years old, and they're huge. You could drive a car through them, the the, what are they
It's
called?
like the California redwoods.
Yeah,
but-
kind of like that. And
Sequoias.
recently, actually, like 6 months ago or something, they started logging them.
I've read this.
Yeah, they've been logging for quite some time now. But 6 months ago, it was sort of the protest movement against it was coming to a head.
Yeah, and it was just so sad. The idea of them logging those beautiful trees was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But people did come out and they protest, you know, and like they camped out and tried to protect. But it like, I remember just feeling this part of my heart break because, you know, there'd be like 20 people all standing and fighting for the trees. And then they're like, you know, they come with their big machines and it's just like one by one. It's like, feels like they're really, you know, it's that proverb that, you know, there's an ancient proverb saying like, it's when we don't have any more water and fish, we will realize we can't eat money.
Yes.
You know, and I just remember thinking that, seeing that. And I think it's important, even, you know, as we're talking about the younger generation too, it's like even for the younger generation to, again, reconnect with nature. And we were speaking about it earlier, why like we decided to raise Xavier in Costa Rica. Because this is a place that at least we feel he is truly understanding the connection. He's on the beach, he's in the jungle, you know, that's his playground. Whereas there's a lot of children out there in the urban, you know, cities that miss that. So it's like, maybe we need to start incorporating exercises, like you're saying, these little offerings for children even, to start like connect deeper. So then we can keep those old growth forests, you know, and keep fighting for sustainability in our world, because you guys do a lot of work as well. And like I know you're very loud voices in terms of like with Blue Spirit and everything, in terms of like, you know, eco sustainability and everything like that. Have you guys found any? I mean, Costa Rica is pretty good, I find, with the sustainability.
But all places
aspect.
have their problems.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so here in Costa Rica, there remains a lot of issues with the use of pesticides and things like that. But
the old agricultural, and I mean, there's a whole movement, of course, with permaculture and protecting the nature, but there's still, you know, old farmers who have been sold, you know, bad stuff that you wouldn't even use somewhere else anymore. You know?
or as you see living here in Nosara, all of a sudden it becomes people who move in and would almost like to make it like an American little town.
Have you guys noticed like a shift? Yeah.
You've been here a while.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess you've seen a big shift.
I mean, we've seen a shift,
Yeah.
but you've been here, I mean, much longer than us. How do you feel about the shift?
You know, I mean, that's an area where I really want to be more mobilized with some of the people about just making sure that it's okay if people move here. We just have to make sure that the values of what's bringing them here isn't lost. It's so.
Yeah, it's funny because there's such a real reason so many people come, or they come thinking, oh, it's sunny, and then they fall in love with what Costa Rica is. But then they want everything they had in California and try to bring it all here. And you're like, no, you got it backwards. Like,
You're still in the jungle.
you know, it's so funny.
It's really a funny one.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Even this morning, like we were getting ready to do some audio and set up a recording studio, and Juliana's getting ready to go and do some voiceover work, and the power goes just like that. And I think at this point, we've just come to a point where we just look at each other and we go, well, we do live in the jungle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, exhale. And
move
okay,
on.
what do we got to do?
Yeah.
It was really funny. Like, and it was just like, well, that's, you know, don't resist and recognize that, like, you're here for a reason, and it's not for the same
And that's a really
luxuries.
good training.
Yeah,
Because
it actually.
It really is. It's like you just sort of give yourself to it instead of trying to make it be other than, because other than isn't what I want to live in.
That's right.
Because it has these other aspects to it.
Totally. We all lived in other than before.
Yeah.
That's why we're here, maybe. It's interesting. I mean, speaking of shifts, I think it's interesting too, because, you know, we began this conversation talking about like the beginning of Omega and you guys starting this beautiful retreat center. And then, you know, I'm curious about your perception of sort of the spiritual community traveling through the journeys that you have and where we are today. And sort of the state of it, and if you've seen a shift, and sort of what is the need? Is there a need in this day and age that people like us should be focusing on and talking about more?
Wow, I think it's a very broad question, and I'm definitely don't feel entitled to speak about all the communities.
Of course.
But from your perspective, I guess.
What's been an ongoing, and I would say some disappointment for me, is that there's still this desire to have a guru, have the one that knows.
Oh my God.
And people getting still caught in that, that this one knows and I don't, but I'm going to try and get that. And so it's very still achievement oriented.
Right.
So I want to become enlightened. I want to achieve enlightenment. And when you hear the traditions, it's one doesn't become enlightened for self, it's for the benefit of all others. And so there's still a lot of ego teaching. And from some very smart and wise people who I think then get trapped in this dynamic. So that concerns me because it so reflects what's happening out in the world, which is that we have people who are getting, see, the trap of fame is that you start to believe your own fame, is that you are the one, and then
You believe your own press.
I'm the one. You know, I didn't realize I'm the one, but they all tell me
And
I'm
it feels
the
so
one.
good.
And so that remains a trap. It's a trap that even happens in our governmental political world.
Of course.
Where somebody rises to this and they surround themselves with everybody who's like this to them, so they don't get any real feedback except for people who just say, yes, yes, you're the one. So that's a very difficult thing that we're in right now. And somehow that has to be unfolded, unraveled, made. And I think that's difficult to do, but not impossible. And I think that's the work in our time. It's the work in our time is that there's nothing special about anybody. We're all just here doing what we do, and we don't want to make anyone grandiose. We want the person who's learned something to pass it on to the next person, and then learn from each other. And that's really what, for me, I think feels needs to be happening in our world. And as I talk with people, I think there are a lot of people coming to that recognition and wanting to see how that gets done.
Right.
And that, to me, is the work right now. And I think it's the work in the spiritual field, and it's one of the reasons I like, as we talk about our Tibetan teacher, what I like is they keep referring to their teachers.
Yeah.
And I like that because it's not saying I. And they're referring to great teachings that have happened, that have been passed down to them, that they're passing down to others.
Right.
And now we have to be careful about that because there are some religions who keep passing it down and never allow it to blossom and change. But that to me is passing wisdom is what needs to happen.
Right.
So
Not attaching themselves to that wisdom, right? Like that's what I find. Like
it's
with
not
gurus.
me having that wisdom. It's like we have that wisdom.
Totally.
Yeah, it's not the messenger, it's the message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think also, what you spoke about, and I have a very opinionated opinion about gurus.
Please share.
Oh no, I won't.
You
But
don't wanna
anyway,
go
no,
into that
this will be for
I've
the
heard
next
enough.
podcast. But anyway, the power over dynamics, right? That's, it's an old power over dynamics, which we see, in politics. We see, wow, the rock stars, and not that any one of them is wrong necessarily, but there's still this, the out there is somewhat more better than this deficient little separate unworthy me, right?
For sure.
That's a hook. That's a big hook. And I think, what Stephan said is where the shift needs to happen is like the power with where democracy really happens is when you're not up there and I'm not down there, but when we start to meet here, right?
Totally.
And this is also something I really love about indigenous, shamanic, or the tradition I'm studying with. They worship nature. They would never worship another human being, right? They know human beings create dense energy. Why would I do that? We fail, right?
Yeah.
So, and devotion, I think, is a really important piece. Devotion is the glue, right? Devotion is something that opens our heart. It's like this giving ourselves to something greater. So I understand that we want to project this on, the perfect mother figure, the perfect father figure, right? The whole psychology of that. So I think the shift will happen also, as they say in Buddhism, the next Buddha will not be a Buddha, it will be the Sangha. So the next Buddha is the group. So it's us, it's the we. And then I think that's where...
You mean the four of us? Or?
Yeah, just the four of us, exactly. Not you, the cameraman, not you. So, but, it's this community sense, the sister brotherhood, I really like that, and I actually always do when I teach a week-long retreat, when I just teach by myself, we always end at the last day. I do a particular ritual where everyone gets to claim back their inner gold that they might have projected on anyone along, or onto me during the week, because I'm spouting all this wisdom and I seem to know. There's a beautiful process, and then they really claim it back, and I'm free. I'm just another human being.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important.
Giving the inner gold.
The inner gold. Well, the idea came from, there's this beautiful little book. It's called Inner Gold by Robert A. Johnson, who was a Jungian analyst, and he speaks very potently about how we all need in our lives, at some point, someone who holds our inner gold for us, because it's too heavy to carry it by ourselves. These are maybe moments, when we are in crisis and you just feel you're a failure, but your best buddy says, no, come on, I know what you're made of. This is, yes, it's a rough time, but, I see, your gift, So your best buddy is holding your inner gold in that moment. But when we go to someone for healing, for learning, for the path of liberation, like a healer, a spiritual teacher, a psychotherapist, there's this unconscious contract that happens, which Robert Johnson says, we just need to name it. We just need to explain it, which is, I'm coming to you, the therapist, the spiritual teacher, because I can't see my inner gold, or, I had glimpses of it, but I can't really fully carry it yet. Can you help me? And if it's a good teacher, he says I'm holding it for you, knowing very well that in a split second, I give it back to you when the time has come and when you claim it. And many just, gurus like to hold on to the gold because it makes them more shiny.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's right.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you say that, because in our experience, we've had some people come up to us or send us an email, be like, oh, you've changed my life. You've done this and this. It's like, we always have to take a step back. Like, no, we did nothing to you. Like, you did that.
You did the work.
You did the work. Like, teachers and gurus and spiritual teachers, they're just
showing the way.
Showing the way. And it's the people that are having to do the work, because you can get all the teachings, but if you don't apply it to yourself, your life's not going to change.
Yes.
So, and that's the thing that I completely agree with you. It's these gurus aren't like magicians that are just changing people's lives. And we always say, like, we don't do anything except put videos online.
We
have
have a hard time, and we spent 3 full days discussing, like, do we feel right calling ourselves yoga teachers? Like, are we masters of this enough to say I am a teacher?
Yeah.
So we came to the conclusion we're disciples of yoga, rather than all the disciples teach each other.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm not a master of yoga. So I, of course, at the border when I'm coming over and they're like, "What do you do?" I'm a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I say. And then I go, "Oh, he got me." But because if I said I'm a disciple of yoga, I don't know if I get through. But it's interesting because it really, like, and I remember us like just mining through that idea, and because it just comes down to the fact, I love this, the collective we, like that we are the next, like hearing that the next Buddha is going to be a body of people. Well, that's the way to enlightenment, is helping each other.
Yeah.
And no one person can show you the way.
No.
I mean, maybe they could. That's interesting. It's interesting.
Can be the goalpost, right? But you have to do the work yourself.
Yeah.
That's where it all lies.
Yeah.
And you can't give your goal to that, like you've done everything. Because it all comes to us. And I truly believe that when people start to realize that, understanding that their power is in their heart and they can change their life, they can use different tools, and there's many tools available to them. But they have to do the work themselves. Like, that's how we're going to create the golden age.
Yeah.
That's how everyone's going to come together and create this
Yeah.
beautiful new life that we all deserve to live in.
And we can call it labor of love instead work.
I love that.
That's
Labor of love.
your conscious word choice. It's beautiful. You know, we don't call it bad energy. You know, we don't call it work. It's all, like, it's amazing. I think words are so powerful, and I've been having a lot of conversations about that lately too. It's just like just changing. You know, just instead. You know, I used to years ago have a habit of being like, well, to be honest, this and this and this. What do you mean, well, to be honest? Am I not honest all the time? And so I had to, and that was the beginning of this journey of like, words are so powerful because they represent like us. They represent the feeling and the energy inside of us. So being wiser, the labor of love, like that's so beautiful.
The labor of love.
Yeah, no, I love it.
It's beautiful. Wow. Well, I think this is a beautiful
good ending, no?
Yeah, I think so.
Just as a message of all, there are beautiful places that you guys create and that people can come find healing, but the real healing is going to
Happen
in here.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so
so
much.
much.
It's great to hang out with you.
Yeah.
I've missed you both.
I missed you guys
I missed
too.
you guys too. It's been so long.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
What a beautiful hour or whatever it's been. I'm not sure.